Before we start, we advise viewers to consider carefully. The following content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim testimony in federal court regarding the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. According to Inner City Press, the court was not expecting his presence. The reporters didn't even have his name on standby. But when Jim Carrey walked through the courtroom door, quietly, seriously, without his trademark smile, the entire room seemed to freeze. Famous for his comedic talent, his mask, and his outrageous antics, Jim was not here to entertain. He was here to confess. What he revealed from the witness stand was not just disturbing, but shocking. He recounted doing things he still couldn't talk about without trembling, that his success was not only due to talent, but also to compliance, and overseeing it all. Sean Diddy Combs. With a trembling voice, Carrey recalled candlelight rituals, ice-filled bathtubs, and powerful elite figures in Hollywood standing by as he was initiated. This was not a testimony, it was a spiritual cleansing, and it changed everything. No cameras were ready, and no reporters had reserved seats. But when the courtroom door opened that morning and Jim Carrey quietly entered, everything came to a halt. The man known for his extraordinary performances, the rubber-faced comedian, the prankster on talk shows, the man who once made the whole world laugh with just a grin, looked nothing like Jim Carrey. He wore a black coat, sunglasses, and had such a vacant expression that even seasoned reporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He walked like a man about to do something terrifying. The courtroom, already tense from Diddy's trial, fell silent. Even the judge looked up from her notes. One of the police officers leaned into the prosecutor's ear. The words, "Jim Carrey is here to testify," echoed throughout the federal courtroom. No one saw this coming. Carrey tucked a brown folder under his arm, gripping it tightly as if it were a secret he'd been holding for decades. His pace was slow and deliberate. Diddy turned in his seat and stared at him. At first, there was confusion. Then, as Carrey approached the witness stand, something changed in Diddy's gaze, as if he recognized or feared something. "I'm not here for revenge," Jim gently stated, removing his sunglasses as he approached the stand. "I'm here to speak the things I've never spoken." He raised his right hand, swore an oath, and took a deep breath as he sat down. For the first time in the trial, the courtroom wasn't waiting for any lawyers, prosecutors, or witnesses on the list. He was waiting for a man who built his career on laughter to finally stop hiding behind the laughter. What happened next shook the whole room. "I did things that even I can't say without choking up," Jim said, almost in a whisper, and Sean Combs was at the center of this event. You could feel the air leave the room. No one moved. No one dared. A few hands covered mouths. A juror had to look away. With both hands. What I saw, what I was told to do, what I agreed to thinking it was part of the climb, haunts me. Jim Carrey gripped the edge of the witness stand with both hands. What I saw, what I was told to do, what I agreed to thinking it was part of the climb, haunts me. The judge leaned slightly forward, signaling him to continue. What Jim Carrey said next would become headline news. But in that moment, he was just a trembling man, finally speaking into the silence that had bound him for decades. The tension had not eased. No one breathed too loudly. No one interrupted Jim Carrey. His face was pale as a ghost and his voice trembled but steady, telling the court what Hollywood had always feared he might say. "I found it funny, but that wasn't enough." He went back to the late 1980s and early 1990s when he was struggling in Los Angeles, performing stand-up at every dark club that would have him. "I would impersonate, clown around, anything to make others laugh. I just wanted to do that. And I was told there were people who could help." Jim Carrey said it all began with a party, a private one. The invitation came through intermediaries. He described being invited to a house in the Hollywood Hills belonging to a powerful person. That person, he later learned, was Sean Combs. At that time, I didn't even know who he was. Jim explained that he was new to the music game, but everyone said he was in, that he had connections not just in music, but also in film. Then came the suggestions. Jim asserted that he was told that to get noticed, he needed to attend certain gatherings, meet certain people, and if asked, participate. At first, I thought they meant cuddling, just social stuff. But then I was told straight out that if I wanted to audition for certain roles, I needed to go through Diddy. That's when his voice broke a little. And I did. I went through him. The courtroom was silent. Jim Carrey described that he got a call from a manager he was very eager to work with. He said there was a role coming up, a big role, saying I found it funny, but others had gone ahead of me. Unless I made a connection. That connection, he said, led him to a meeting with Sean Diddy Combs. It wasn't a meeting. It wasn't a job. It was something else. Then he said so. I showered with Sean Combs to get a role. Those words hit like a brick. Even the stenographer flinched slightly as she typed. Carrey explained that he was taken to a lavish room where Sean Diddy Combs was waiting. He described the room with disturbing details. Soft lighting, candles, a bathtub already filled with water. I was told it was a cleansing ritual, that if I wanted to be taken seriously in the industry, I had to be comfortable letting go of my old self. Jim stared down at the table. It was humiliating, but I did it because I thought it was necessary. The judge allowed the testimony to continue, citing its relevance to establishing a pattern of behavior and coercion. Carrey clarified that no explicit threats were made, but the pressure was implied. It wasn't about doing this or that, but doing this or fading into obscurity. I was made to feel that this was the only door, and Sean Combs was the doorman. He paused, then said something that few could forget. Hollywood didn't just break me. Did he own me? At this point, even the most skeptical attendees of the trial were struggling to hide their discomfort. No one expected a man like Jim Carrey, a global icon of laughter and absurdity, to testify about something so deeply troubling. But his tone was steady and his words were precise. There was no mistaking what he was saying. Jim explained that after being taken to the room, he was asked to take off his clothes and step into the tub where Sean Diddy Combs was waiting. He smiled as if it was normal. He said, "This is how great people are born. You leave your old self in the water." Carrey said he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. But those around him, assistants, industry intermediaries, even a prominent casting agent, simply waited, silently observing, not saying a word. "I went in," Jim said almost in a whisper. "I went in because I thought this was a metaphor, a strange ritual for an artist. But it wasn't," he described. Sean Diddy Combs asked him personal questions while bathing about his family, his fears, his limits, like being interviewed for a cult, as if they were testing how far I could go to belong. And then, he said, Sean Diddy Combs gave him one final instruction. If he wanted the role, he had to wash his back. There were audible gasps from the gallery. Even the members of the press looked pale. "I did that," Jim confessed. "I scrubbed the back of a man I barely knew, because everyone around me acted like it was just normal. Like this was the final exam before they handed me the keys to my career." He described stepping out of the bath, being handed a robe, and then escorted to a side room. Inside, he found a script of The Cable Guy, a bottle of champagne, and a piece of paper. "Welcome to the next level." Jim closed his eyes. That movie changed my life, but it also destroyed something inside me. Because now, I know I didn't make it because I was good. I made it because I surrendered. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. What Jim Carrey just revealed wasn't a crime by legal standards. No violence, no threats, no aggression, but it was something else, something just as chilling. It was a system of psychological control. And Diddy, Jim said, wasn't just a participant. He orchestrated it like a high priest, like a puppeteer. He looked down at his trembling hands. "I gave up my dignity to play a role, and I've been trying to wash it away ever since." Now, the courtroom didn't feel like a place for legal proceedings. It felt like a theater of revelation. A long overdue confession was unfolding in real time. And Jim Carrey, still sitting at the witness stand, seemed to carry the weight of every soul that had been silent for too long. He leaned forward, fingers slightly trembling, and said what everyone was waiting to hear. The parties were even worse. He began by describing the first Diddy party he ever attended. It was 1996, a year before Liar Liar made him famous. He received a private invitation, no address, just a driver. He was asked to wear black. I thought it was a networking event, but I quickly realized it was something else. Carrey described arriving at a mansion in Hollywood Hills. The air smelled of incense and something metallic. Phones were confiscated at the entrance. NDA forms were handed out casually like party favors, and once you stepped through the threshold, nothing felt real anymore. There were people in masks, models, athletes, directors, but no one said each other's names. They just nodded as if we were all there to perform. He explained how the house had been transformed, not into a party space, but into a labyrinth. Candlelit hallways, velvet drapes concealing smaller rooms, hypnotic music looping from hidden speakers. I kept waiting for the part where we sat down and talked about the project, but instead, someone handed me a tray of drugs and whispered, "Pick your night." He refused, but still stayed. I was too scared to leave. I thought leaving meant I would never work again. Then came the part that made the courtroom switch seats. There were people brought into the room, both men and women. Some looked excited, while others appeared terrified. I asked someone, "What's going on?" And they said, "This is the second act." He went on to describe the moment a woman, only 20 years old, staggered out of one of the rooms, crying and clutching her dress. No one helped her, not even a glance. It was like people had been trained to ignore suffering, as if it was broken. Delusion. Carrey's voice dropped as he described walking into one of the back rooms. There, he said he saw a famous comedian lying unconscious on the couch. Surrounding him were 3 men in suits and a woman, all laughing. They were taking pictures, posing with him as if it were hilarious. And in the middle of the house, hovering between rooms, was Diddy. He never stayed in one room for long. Jim explained, he was like a ghost host, always watching, always checking, as if he was making sure the right people were doing the wrong things. The courtroom was silent, not a cough, not a footstep. Carrey wrapped up this part by saying, "It wasn't a party, it was a ritual, and the price of entry is your conscience." Jim Carrey didn't stop there. His hands gripped the edge of the witness stand like a man bracing for a fall. But the deeper he went, the more determined he seemed to pull out the truth, no matter how painful. "You have to understand," he said, scanning the jury. "Everything I saw was connected to Diddy. Every room, every deal, every name I was told to keep quiet about. All of it leads back to him." He explained that over the years, he was continuously invited back. Different venues, the same scene, the same rules, and the same people. Or at least the same type of people models. Executives, influencers, actors, often those just stepping into stardom. They'd help you right before you were about to blow up. That's when you're most vulnerable, when you still need them. Carrey described an incident in 2001 when he brought a fellow actor to one of the events. He didn't name the person directly, but said, "You know his face. He's in every comedy you love." That actor supposedly left in the middle of the night and never came back. Years later, Jim said he got a message from him saying, "Thanks for not stopping me from leaving. I was about to lose my soul." Then came the chilling part. There are people stationed at every level. Carrey says they don't just throw parties. They're gathering intel. They're keeping an eye on who's breaking the rules, who's involved, who needs to be reminded that silence is safer than honesty. He named agents, producers, and even a studio executive who frequently appeared at Diddy's events. They're there to observe. Sometimes they leave with tapes, sometimes with contracts, but deals are made at night, not in boardrooms, but in bedrooms. Carrey testified that one of his most disturbing realizations happened during a meeting in 2003. He attended a party at a penthouse hosted by Diddy in New York. There, he saw a famous filmmaker take a young artist into his private lounge. "I know that kid," Jim said. "He just signed with a record label. He looked terrified, but no one stopped it, not even me." Jim admitted he lived with guilt for not intervening more. "I rationalized it. telling myself it was just how this world operates, but it shouldn't be, and it never should have been. The courtroom felt like it had shifted from a trial to a reckoning. "I'm here to testify," Jim said, "because I don't want to be complicit any longer. I don't want to sit in interviews talking about Ace Ventura while pretending I don't see the demons behind the curtain." And again, he made it clear that that demon was Sean Combs. At this point, some people in the courtroom were clearly shocked. One juror was in tears. The judge called for a 5-minute recess, but Carrey insisted he keep going. "Finish," he said. "I've been silent for too long." The prosecutor nodded silently. "I want to." Jim took a deep breath and began to explain the most painful part of all, the silence. "I didn't speak up because I thought I was crazy," he said. "That's how they make you feel. Like you dreamed it all, like you misunderstood everything. And if you try to talk about it, you'll be labeled as delusional or broken." He described years of internal struggle after Bruce Almighty, after Eternal Sunshine, even after, "Yeah, more, sir." He said he smiled on the red carpet while internally crumbling. "People would tell me, 'You have it all.' And I'd go home and stare at the wall for hours because I knew how I got it, and I couldn't live with that." Carrey said that when he finally tried to confide in people, agents, therapists, even close friends, he often faced avoidance. They'd say, "That's just how things are," or worse, "Don't dig that up. It's dangerous." Then he described the hallucinations. "I dream of rooms, parties, bathtubs. I wake up in a sweat, thinking I'm still in that house. My mind keeps replaying it, trying to write it down, but it never changes." He said he started to believe he was the problem, that maybe he had agreed to it. Maybe he had chosen this life. But after hearing the testimonies from other witnesses like Cassie Ventura and Monique, something clicked. They're not crazy, and I'm not either. We've been forced to feel that way, and that's how the machine survives. The courtroom hung on every word. Harry looked down. His voice choked again. "I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid I would lose everything. Afraid they would come after me. Afraid no one would believe me. And afraid that if I spoke the truth, I would confirm the nightmare everyone tries to forget." He paused. "But I'm not afraid anymore." By this point in Jim Carr's testimony, the courtroom had ceased to operate like a courtroom. The atmosphere was heavier. No one rustled papers. No one whispered. Every gaze was fixed on the man who once represented joy for millions. Now, he was telling a horror story that shook the foundations of the entertainment industry. Jim adjusted the microphone. His hands were no longer shaking. His voice was calmer, almost eerily steady. "What I'm about to do, I've rehearsed in silence for many years. There's a list," he said. He explained that there was no handwritten list, no documents to submit. But to him, everyone in Hollywood knew that list existed. It's the unspoken truth. The same faces always showing up at parties. The same director, the same handler, the A-list actors with squeaky clean reputations, but somehow always present when the cameras aren't around. They're not just guests, they're the gatekeepers. Finally, he began to reveal names. Carrey said that many times. He saw an actor who has now won an Oscar, someone beloved for playing moral heroes, attending what he called initiation ceremonies backstage. He claimed a major daytime talk show host had been present during an incident involving a young dancer who passed out and had to be carried out while no one called for help. He also mentioned a famous music producer who brought fresh blood to these parties, promising them careers in exchange for their silence. But just as Carrey turned back to Diddy, the courtroom turned icy. Sean Combs didn't just top the list. Jim said he was in the mix. These aren't just people benefiting from the system. He managed the system. He managed them. He said Diddy would move. He said that Diddy would be moving through the rooms, introducing the right people. A subtle nod means he's safe or she's in. Carrey claims these moments are like a ritual, moments where trust is quietly reinforced through complicity. And then he describes a specific scene from 2005. I was at a party mansion. The upper floors were blocked off. Someone handed me a key card and said, VIP only. I went upstairs and saw a room full of masks, not just for fashion, but for anonymity. And in that room were 5 names you would immediately recognize: a director, an A-list actor, an executive. And at the center of it all was Diddy. According to Carrey, these individuals were not just partying. They were watching, observing others, deciding who could be trusted and who could be exploited. Jim said that the higher you go in that house, the lower the ethics become. He looked directly at the jury. These are not isolated events. They are orchestrated, and Diddy is the conductor. If Jim Carrey's earlier testimony had been shaky, if the trembling honesty had defined his opening, what happened next shattered all of that calm completely. He paused for a long time. The silence stretched so long that the judge nearly asked him if he needed a break. Then, with his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the courtroom wall, Carrey began to cry. "This is the part I took the longest to say," he said, his voice choked. "Because it sounds crazy, but it's the truth, and I've lived with it for too long." He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the stand. "You can't be famous in this town without being touched. Touched, not necessarily physically, but mentally, emotionally, intellectually. Somewhere, somehow, someone has to get inside you, break something, and then rebuild you in their image. Not necessarily physically, but mentally, emotionally, intellectually. Somewhere, somehow, someone has to get inside you, break something, and then rebuild you in their image." The gallery was frozen. I thought I could avoid it, that I could smile, be a funny, harmless guy. But when it came time to move up, from comedian to leading man, I was told I had to go through the initiation. And the one who lit that fire was Sean Combs. He began listing psychological scars like old war wounds, panic attacks, disassociation, self-hatred. He recounted days on set, making everyone laugh, then going back to his trailer and crying uncontrollably. I couldn't tell anyone because if I did, it would mean I was weak, and weak people disappear in Hollywood. Carrey revealed that there were times he even thought about suicide. "There was a moment in 2007 after the number 23 I thought I was done. Not just with acting, but with breathing. I thought, if this is what success feels like, then I don't want any part of it." He described the moment he saw an online photo, a picture taken at one of Diddy's parties that he didn't even know was being taken. In the background, he could see himself strung out, glazed eyes, next to someone he didn't even remember meeting. "That was the moment I realized I was no longer living. I had survived." The prosecution remained silent. There were no objections or cross-examinations. No one dared to interrupt a man who was enduring decades of pain in real time. And then in a whisper, Jim said, "They took my laughter away. They took my light." And the one holding the match still sat right there at every party, smiling while the rest of us burned. The courtroom was silent, not out of respect, but out of shock. Even Diddy's legal team, who until this point had interrupted, objected, dismissed previous testimonies, were now completely silent. Whatever they intended to say no longer mattered. Jim Carrey had taken over the room with a truth so distorted it couldn't be dismissed. He slowly regained his composure. No more tears, just a solemn calm. "I don't want him to go to jail for what he did to me," Carrey said, nodding towards Diddy. "I want him to go to jail for what he has done to all of us." He described the entertainment industry as a parasitic organism feeding off the ambitions of the young, the poor, and the desperate. "You think they give you a career because you have talent. That's a lie. They create the illusion of opportunity. Then watch what you're willing to trade." He listed the names of others he believed had been forced to participate. Many of them have faded into obscurity. Some couldn't make it. Others tried but failed. The ones who didn't survive weren't the weak. They were human. And then a final disturbing revelation. Carrey claimed that before the 2000 MTV Movie Awards, he received an invitation from someone on Diddy's team. It was a coded message. Some rooms and a time. I was instructed to show up clean. No cologne, just vulnerability. I didn't go, but the next day, my public relations manager told me I had lost a major endorsement deal. Without giving a reason, he paused. Sean Combs didn't need to say a word. He just had to make a call. Carrey leaned forward, his voice barely audible but still firm. He made me do it, and I still have to pay the price. The judge asked if he had any closing remarks. Jim looked around the room, then spoke to each person individually and to everyone all at once. To anyone watching this video, to anyone who thinks I'm exaggerating or delusional, I hope you're right. I hope I'm the crazy one. Because if not, this industry is more twisted than anyone could imagine. And with that, he stepped down. No applause, no fanfare. Just the echo of a man's truth bouncing off the walls that have long protected the powerful. As he walked out of the courtroom, the reporters didn't rush him. No one asked for selfies. They just watched him walk away as if witnessing someone who had just survived a storm that no one else could see. And somewhere behind him, Diddy sat quietly. Because in the end, Jim Carrey wasn't there to entertain. He was there to testify. And what he said would haunt Hollywood forever.